And you're unmuted for Clubhouse, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I should be unmuted as well?
Yes.
Clubhouse? Okay.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Oh, 1 second. I gotta fill my volume on the Clubhouse app. All right. So welcome to Betrayal of a Nation. The Constitution is null and void. A 6-part series of panel discussions centered around the topics highlighted in the documentary Betrayal of a Nation. We are here on Facebook Live and Clubhouse every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern for the next 6 weeks. At 9 p.m., we will open the floor on Clubhouse for audience questions and comments. Tonight's show is part 1 of the discussion, Black Wall Street. I'm Brandy Webb, and I am the director of Betrayal of a Nation, and my co-host tonight, Trina Asidu, is the producer. Betrayal of a Nation is a documentary that puts the United States government on trial for crimes committed against Black and Brown citizens. Betrayal of a Nation will premiere on a major platform in the upcoming weeks. Once we're able to make an official announcement, we will let you know when and where you can tune in. In the meantime, allow tonight's discussion to get your wheels turning and your fire burning.
Okay, I would like to introduce tonight's amazing panelists of historians, educators, and activists. I am excited to bring to you Shanice Jordan. Shanice was born and raised in New York City. Her family has a long history as community activism for urban development in New York City. She also had the opportunity to live in the South, where she learned more about her family's roots and the history of Black triumphs in the South. Shanice is also an avid researcher filled with a wealth of knowledge. She is also known for dropping gems on Clubhouse in various Clubhouse rooms. Next, we have Vanessa Hall-Harper. Vanessa is a Tulsa native, and she is the City Council of District 1 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as well as the only Black woman council in the city. Vanessa Hall-Harper is currently the manager of the Healthy Living Program and is responsible for the mobilization of community organizations and programs that develops and implement community interventions and system organizational level changes that improves health and wellness in the Tulsa community. Vanessa is also featured in the documentary Betrayal of a Nation.
And last but never least, we have the Reverend Dr. Robert Turner. He is the pastor of the historic Vernon AME Church, the only standing landmark in the Black Wall Street district. The Reverend Doctor was blessed to have known a few of the surviving victims of the Tulsa Massacre. He is the commissioner of the National African American Reparations Commission, the president of the historic Greenwood Main Street District, dean for Jackson Theological Seminary, a consultant, and a human rights activist. During this pandemic, I watched this man all on my social media feed, protesting and providing food to those in need. Like Vanessa, you can catch the Reverend Doctor in the Betrayal of a Nation documentary once it is available to the public. So Black Wall Street was a Black-owned district in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the early 1900s. It was torn down by jealous whites with the help of government officials that ultimately wanted the land. Before we start this discussion, I'm going to play a little clip from the documentary about the businesses in Black Wall Street.
This community thrived with over 200 businesses.
You had repair shops for automobiles. You had dentists. There were theaters, barbers, beauticians.
They had a bus system.
They built churches. They built monumental edifices, such as the one that I pastor.
I just see a vibrant community, beautiful Black people.
Everything was in Greenwood. Everything.
Man, every time I hear the account of the beautiful Black Wall Street, I just can't help but to get upset. So I would like to read a quote to all of you from Paul Gardullo, the curator at the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., where there's a typewritten manuscript called The Tulsa Race Riot and Three of its Victims. And it's on display at the museum. And it gives an eyewitness account of the race riot, and it's written by the lawyer. His name is B.C. Franklin. So the quote is, "It was the frustration of poor whites not knowing what to do with a successful Black community, and in coalition with the city government were given permission to do what they did." How does that quote make you feel? And have any of you gotten a chance to read the manuscript that I referred to that was written by B.C. Franklin? Shanice, if you would start.
Hello, hi. Yes, can you guys hear me? Let's make sure my audio is good.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, learning about this atrocity that happened to these particular people, it's heartbreaking, and just the quote alone, it kind of just tells a story of what America's foundation has always kind of been built upon. And I hope that through our research and through what we're learning in this society is that Black and brown bodies have never been protected under the Constitution, under the law, as stated. So I hope that moving forward, even tonight when we have this conversation, that we are bringing to the forefront the hidden histories and the hidden knowledge that's been basically stolen from us.
Would anyone else like to tackle that question?
Yes, I've heard it. I've not read it myself, but I've heard portions of the manuscript, and it angers me, right? Because it's just the question still remains today. What has changed? But just as he said, it was nothing but pure hate and envy. And not only was the city involved, but we need to recognize that the state of Oklahoma and its government was involved as well, what I call complicit in the massacre. And so as far as I'm concerned, all must come to account. And so when we talk about reparations and making this right, we're talking about that from a level of not only our local municipal government, but also our state government. And so, yeah, it's certainly still something that every time I hear words of our famous historians, it gets my blood boiling and makes me want to fight even harder.
Thank you. Reverend Doctor, would you like to add to that? Or if not, I could move on to the next question. Unmute your microphone. We can't hear you.
I think the two queens did a more than sufficient job in answering that question.
Thank you. All right. Well, if you look at the Constitution as a contract, a written agreement that should be upheld, and then take a clause that was breached, like the Fourth Amendment, how would you use the events that occurred during the Tulsa massacre? So how would you use those events to discuss this breach? So I'll read the Fourth Amendment for those who don't know. The Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution provides that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So Dr. Turner, Reverend Doctor, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I definitely feel that the Fourth Amendment was not adhered to. There were no warrants. A militia deputized by our sheriff came in and burned, looted, and killed innocent people. But not only was the Fourth Amendment abridged or violated, but the Fifth Amendment also. There was no due process. We were taking our land, our houses, our wealth were taken. People were arrested, put into concentration camps in this city with no due process, simply because they were Black. They were robbed, killed, taken to internment camps, and stayed there until a white person came to vouch for them. So, I mean, I would add not just the Fourth, but the Fifth Amendment as well. Both of them were violated, and nobody went to jail, right? Not a single person went to jail. So for all of these old Tea Party people and all these so-called strict constitutionalists, you know, where are you on this issue when you had constitutional rights that were violated in broad daylight by the government against innocent law-abiding citizens, and nobody else be charged with the crime?
Thank you. The floor is open to you, Vanessa, as well as Shanice, if you'd like to take this on.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I will preface this by saying I teach federal government. I also teach at our local junior college here in Tulsa. And so this is a copy of the Constitution I shared, and I provide a copy to all of my students. And one of the things I open up with my students is, first of all, understand and know your Constitution. But when we get to chapter 5 in our textbook, it's about civil rights. And I share and will share now that this document was never written with Black people in mind. Never. We were not a consideration. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution was known as the Bill of Rights. They were a part of the Constitution when it was adopted. All of the other amendments after that, our right to vote and all of those types of things, and to engage in the governmental process, were what I call afterthoughts. That's why we call them amendments. But even with the first 10, that is the Bill of Rights, Black people still were not in the mindset of the authors of this document. And so we shouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying we shouldn't fight. Yes, we should fight for our rights, for our constitutional rights. But we have to understand from the jump that we were never considered to be the people group, if you will, that this Constitution spoke about. And so as we continue these fights, we need to have that in mind. These types of things, what happened last week, and the things that we're still fighting today, as far as reparations today and making right today, the wrongs that have been done to our people. Those things are we're going to continue to have to fight for those things, because again, I coin it this way: Black Lives Mattering is not American. It's not even something that is in the mindsets of our society. It's not in our institutions. It's not in our policies. It's not in our laws. Black Lives Mattering is not American. And so at the end of the day, we certainly hold this document up. We call it the greatest document ever written, and all that good stuff. It sounds beautiful. I mean, poetry wise, it does sound beautiful. It was beautifully written. But at the end of the day, Europeans were the only people that was in mind when it comes to the Constitution and fulfilling and living out the freedoms or the liberties that are spoken of in this document.
That was such a powerful statement, Vanessa. You were so right. Black Lives Mattering is not American, and that really is the sad truth of this country that we live in. Shanice, I'll let you take it over. If you'd like to respond to that, please let me know if you need me to repeat the question. I know your computer, you had some computer issues for a second there.
Yes, I would love to hear the question one more time, because I did have a little mishap.
No worries. So if you look at the Constitution as a contract, a written agreement that should be upheld, and then you take a clause like the Fourth Amendment, how would you use the events that occurred during the Tulsa massacre to discuss the breach? And then the Fourth Amendment is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, effects. And no person shall be violated, no warrant shall be issued unless there's probable cause.
Okay, so here's my take on that, is that what we saw, and from what my knowledge was, a lot of these people that were even coming to the Tulsa area were also people who were coming through the Trail of Tears. So these were people who are already disenfranchised, and they're already taken from one location to another location. So the amendments or the Constitution, they already didn't apply to these set of people. You know, even when they passed the first act of 1906 in Oklahoma, it basically solidified the racial divide that was brewing there in Tulsa at that particular time as well. So you're already seeing how, even though on paper in a constitution, it's saying by law, you as a man or as a woman or whoever on this particular soil, you have the right to not be searched, or your warrant, or your basically your land is your property. But we're actively seeing how even in Tulsa, a lot of that area was Indian territory. And these particular white settlers came, and they got it passed to where that part of that land and that space was their territory now. You know, so it's always been a tug of war of, once again, were we full active humans underneath that particular law in their eyes? And to my opinion, to what happened to those innocent residents of Tulsa, no, we weren't. You know, the Fourth Amendment was breached. They were allowed to come into our homes. They were allowed to basically burn up. Even when I hear the accounts from the people who were living witnesses, and they can say that, yeah, people came in my home with torches. They came in my home and told us we had to run, we had to go. And then they lit the curtains on fire, you know? So that amendment, and even the Second Amendment, even now, we talk about current times, we're seeing even how the First Amendment is being breached. We can talk about that too, you know. But to kind of get back on topic, I think it's I think it can be argued, you know, if it was, I guess in their viewpoint, if it was basically settled and that they were allowed to do such a thing, because we were in their eyes considered slaves. We weren't considered full active humans. We were supposed to, even in the Tulsa areas, it was segregated from the north end and the south end. One end was the white end and one end was the black end. And it's like, at the end of the day, do we really fall underneath these amendments? We still question that, even with the 14th Amendment, with the 13th Amendment. We're still questioning about if slavery still exists today, if it's not just retransformed and remixed into prison labor, you know? So of course, the laws have always been breached on us. They have always, sometimes they have not protected us, and other times they have. I will also just add quickly that one of the things that I studied, even with the Black codes, is that the only amendment that they allowed the people under the Black codes of the Jim Crow laws, that they were still allowed to have their Second Amendment. If they couldn't have their first, their third, their fourth, or whatever, they can have their Second Amendment. And it makes you wonder why. You know, you won't allow me to speak, you won't allow me to protest, you won't allow me to have a voice, but I can have a gun. You know, but yet if I use it against you, you will still try me as guilty, even if I'm using it in self-defense. So it's always been like this catch-22 Houdini trick with these particular policies that are placed, and they're claiming that we the people, but is it really for we the Black people too, or is it just we the white people and the ones that we consider to be worthy of these particular amendments?
You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, I was saying, she's absolutely right. We know that this was by design.
Right. So, Reverend Dr. Turner, I heard about the incident that occurred, I think it was recently, when you were at City Hall protesting for repentance and reparations in Tulsa, as you always do, starting in September of 2018. So, and you usually do it on a Wednesday. So I just wanted to know, like, I saw a clip, and really my thought is, Reverend, how deep did you have to dig to remain so poised and steadfast in your mission that day, encountering an angry mob of white men and women who were shouting at you and tugging at your arm? And I believe someone had the audacity to throw water on you. How deep did you have to dig to get through that moment, and what were you thinking?
I dug deep into the reservoirs of my DNA, recalling memories that I didn't know I had. That was the worst 15 minutes of my life. As you stated, just doing what I normally do every week, every Wednesday at City Hall, because they have refused, the city of Tulsa has refused to pay any sort of reparations to people that they killed, and houses that the fire department watched burn, and people who we just said broke the third, fourth, and fifth amendment of the Constitution and have never been prosecuted. Not one district attorney has ever prosecuted any of those people. And definitely the city, the mayor and council has, for the last almost 100 years, passed budgets, and never in one of those budgets has there been anything concerning reparations for the survivors or their descendants. And so going on Wednesday, because that's the day the city council typically meets, which is the day most people in our community have Bible study. And that's another whole conversation about why would this, Tulsa is the only city I've ever lived in that has city council meetings on Wednesday, the same day most people are in Bible study, which is an anomaly by itself, which has its own need for a workshop by itself. But let's just put that in the parking lot. So I'm taking Bible study to them at City Hall, and I read the same scripture. I pretty much say the same message every week. I believe in this old preacher's joke. We preachers do make jokes sometimes, and how this pastor said, his first Sunday at a church, he preached a sermon, and everybody in church went crazy. Everybody was saying, "Amen," how wonderful job he did. And came at the next Sunday, preached the same sermon, and the visitor said, "Amen." Most of the folks were like, "Okay, we get this." Then the third Sunday, he said the same sermon, and the deacons came up to the pastor after and said, "Hey, pastor, you all right?" He said, "I'm fine." And the deacon said, "Well, you've been preaching the same sermon for the last 3 weeks." And the pastor said, "And y'all hadn't changed after either one of them." So I keep preaching the same thing. And so I don't say the same exact thing, but it's pretty much until they do right by our ancestors, until they do right before God, they will hear about the need for repentance, recognize what they did was wrong, and repairing. So one of these days, one of these Wednesdays, I went out, and I don't need a fun fair when I go. I don't even like publicize it. Everybody just knows I'm there. There's one Wednesday that I was out there. There were these anti-maskers, these folk who don't believe COVID-19 is real. People who don't believe in wearing a mask is a legitimate way of keeping COVID numbers down. They were protesting the city passing an ordinance that required everybody to wear masks. And so I'm coming out there, and they're there, and they're like on one section in front of the street sign, and I go to my same pillar and post, and I take my Bible out, and I put my sign up, which has reparations now, and I take my bullhorn out, and I utter these words: "This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." And immediately, I was assaulted. I was mobbed just by saying, quoting a Bible verse that I quote every week. They called me everything truly but a child of God. And it was the worst moments of my life. And as the women were tugging on me and the men threw water on me, and people chanting obscenities toward me, and I'm like by myself. I had people that were trying to record the camera. I had like 2 guys with me, but literally just standing by myself. And as they were poking and prodding on me, as I stated, I went back to a memory in my DNA I didn't know I had. It's like my mind reverted back to 200-300 years ago when my ancestors were kidnapped and taken to this country, and to be placed on auction blocks and to be shackled. And I'm not likening myself to their suffering at all, but I got a glimpse of what it must have felt like to be poked and prodded, and you cannot move because I'm 6'5", 6'6" with shoes on. If I had moved my arm back from one of those women, just the inertia would have caused them to fall back. If I had just snatched my arm back, they would have fallen back. If I had moved my arm out the way, I would have elbowed them in the face. So I could not move because I'm a big black man. Whatever the narrative is, if they are touched, I'm at fault. And the guy who threw water on me, he had a gun. So if I had retaliated towards him at all, I wouldn't be standing here today. And so that, and even to this very moment, even though it's all on YouTube and the video has gone viral, not one of those folk have been charged with a crime. And I press charges. And yeah, now one of those folk have been charged with a crime, and I press charges. It took forever. I think because LeBron James documentary company came down here, I think they were asking questions about it. I finally got a call from TPD about, what I want to do. And I said, I want to proceed, but I waited a whole week. Before I pressed charges, because as a pastor, I was waiting on somebody, one of them, to come back and apologize. I really was. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna wait and give them a chance. And nobody. In fact, what they did do was when Black Lives Matter mural was painted, one of the ladies who assaulted me came down to Greenwood talking about we need to take up the Black Lives Matter mural. And she got into it with some of my other sisters. And so it showed they had no contriteness at all. And not just recently, I got a call from a police officer, and he left the number he left. I couldn't even call back. So it's like they're not really trying to investigate this case. And I get it, because in their eyes, I can't be assaulted by white people. I'm a black man. Like Counselor said, these laws were not made for my defense. They were made to criminalize me.
Right.
But I
just want to make a brief announcement. If you're tuning in from Clubhouse, thank you for tuning in to our live panel discussion on Black Wall Street. We look forward to connecting with you all for a live talk back on Clubhouse in 30 minutes. Thank you so much, Dr. Reverend Turner. Yeah. I know that was a really crazy experience for you. I could tell.
Yeah, I think I'm so glad that you made it out of there alive. It's really unfortunate that these are the issues that we have to deal with, here in this country. And that actually takes me into my next question. When you talk about accountability, we've said that word a lot. We've heard it, especially within the last 4 years. So white government officials aiding and abetting white domestic terrorists, and their efforts to uphold white supremacy is nothing new to America. Now that the Trumpers have stormed and rioted the Capitol, there's talks from elected officials calling for accountability. Accountability was not of any interest to many of these folks when Black lives were at stake. So when you think about the Tulsa riots, how does that make you feel? And
I'll go ahead and answer that. Mm-hmm. Definitely, accountability on white America's side has always been a lack thereof because of their own false ideology that they are superior to us in some sort of way. Not sure why, but that is just their ideologies they've been birthed to have from their forefathers. What we saw in Capitol Hill is we saw a displace, a mockery of what America would consider democracy. This is what they consider their white take back of the land, because they're seeing a new dynamic, a new age that's coming to America, and they can't quite control it. I see, as I heard someone say, I see it's almost like a temper tantrum. And that temper tantrum really is how a lot of them feel. So even though they may condemn it publicly, they may say that it's embarrassing the nation and we have to condemn these folks. But we know that, like you said, there is going to be a lack of accountability. The only ones that we're really seeing them point out are the ones they actually have clear photos of. Now, mind you, when we did have the Black Lives Matter protests, they were picking out people just through face tracking. They were using face tracing to find people in the crowds. So we're seeing already the lack thereof, and they're asking the public to help search for these people. At that point, they're pretty much giving up. Anytime police start asking the public for help to identify people, they're pretty much saying, our hands are washed. If y'all don't do your job, we don't do our job. That's what they're telling us. And so going back to the Tulsa, Oklahoma riots, or I'm not gonna say riot, the massacre, right? That was terrorism on American soil. The people of that particular place, they deserve, once again, their reparations. They deserve to be not just rebuild the buildings, not just the restoration of Black Wall Street. And now this looks like a place where you can just walk through and just take pictures now. This is still not the same thriving community it once was. Therefore, that wealth and the amount of wealth that accumulated over that time period, we transferred that to today's dollars, that was almost $1 billion wealth out there if we translate it to now. So you're looking at a set of people that had to, what did they tell us to do? You had to pull yourself by the bootstrap. You pulled yourself by the bootstrap. You went to college. You still went to, even in the time where they told you that you couldn't be educated, you still had our educated brothers and sisters who came back and said, instead of just going off and living amongst ourselves, we're going to start our own Greenwood. We're going to start our own little a strip of prosperous Black businesses that vary from different industries. You still did it by their way because that was their book. They told us 40 acres and a mule. You knew that was a lie. So therefore you had to continue to keep building. You built, they still come and they tear it down. Because a lot of the times those particular Black Wall Streets, and Tulsa wasn't the only one. You know, you had one in Durham, North Carolina. You had several of prosperous Black communities that were practicing group economics. And a lot of these Black communities were doing exceptionally well than their white counterparts in the same area. So it's a jealousy. It's a hatred to see another, especially a Black man, rising up from the ashes and saying that you can't hold me down. So their accountability, they would never be able to hold themselves to accountability because then they have to admit that a Black person is at their level and they can't, you know, this is not to point out a victim mentality, but they just can't bring themselves to that conclusion. Or they can't tell the truth about the history of our people, even prior to slavery, how powerful we were around the world, in North America, wherever, if you're indigenous, if you came here, unfortunately by boat or whatever the case may be, we have always been resilient people. And to come down and come up your high horse and say, I was wrong, you're pretty much, it's like, for them, it's like they feel like they're going to spit in their forefathers' faces. You're going to spit on the indoctrination that has told you for a long time, you're better than any Black person just because of the skin. Not understanding that we are the true educators and mathematicians and the scientists of the world. A lot of the knowledge was stolen from us. And we can always rebuild. We've always showed that we had the resilience. Today, we're still rebuilding. No matter how many times they knock us down, Black wealth, we're still building that. But you still have to pay your debt to the people you stole from, even for this land. A lot of our Black people here, you know, have indigenous claims. A lot of us had land here. We were pushed off our land. We were taxed off our land. So you're going to tell me that you don't have the right, or you don't have to humble yourself down and say you're right. We are building our nation on top of stolen land. We're building our nations on top of stolen bodies. You're burying us and then saying that you don't exist no more. Your history is gone.
So I have a question, Shanice, yeah. And because I just want to piggyback on the fact that you're talking about the burial. And so I have a question, and I'll throw this at Vanessa. So recently in Tulsa, proof of mass graves surfaced. I heard that Channel 6 News in Tulsa didn't seem too interested in uncovering the stories on the bodies that was buried under the cemetery's row in Tulsa. And actually, this question is for the Reverend as well. Can you speak a little bit about this effort and explain why these excavations are important today?
Reverend Turner, I defer.
Yeah, okay. These excavations are very important because they're still lying there, right? And first of all, they for so long people denied the massacre ever happened, and nobody wanted to talk about it. Black people were intimidated. White folk were, culpable. They were guilty. They got away with murder, literally. And so now there's an effort afoot to make sure these mass graves are excavated. And I will never forget my first inspiration for saying anything about it was seeing the council lady and Christy Williams on the Washington Post on a cover at Oakland Cemetery. And I go to this town hall meeting where the mayor was, and I raised a question. And I asked two questions. Actually, I asked one about I asked the first question about reparations, and the second about the mass graves excavation. He ignored completely my reparations question, and he answered the question on mass graves and saying he would be willing to do that. And then with him and Councilor Hall-Harper, they formed a committee that I was appointed to. But even with that committee, we've seen so much obstruction with people such as the owner of Rolling Oaks, the old Booker T Cemetery, not willing to let us even do a survey, which is the equivalent of having a lawnmower go over your property. He's not even wanting that. And so, yes, I'm not surprised Channel 6 didn't want to cover it because the city didn't want to cover it. The city, nobody wanted to talk about it. And now that we are, I guess, talking about it, it's not even being done, in my humble opinion, in an effective way. They're treating it too much like a historical excavation when it really, to me, is a criminal excavation. This is not a mass suicide burial site. It's a massacre burial site. And so somebody did this, and they've been dragging their feet on whether or not they should get a warrant to go out to the old Booker T site, because when you do a warrant, you have to show who did it. And the city doesn't want to do that because the city did it or was complicit in doing it. So they don't even want to fill out that paperwork to give to a judge. So they're trying to do it this other roundabout way. Let's come to a consensus with the owner. And that's why it's taking so long. And meanwhile, you got bodies lying out in the streets, lying in mud with no tombstone, with no headstone, never been laid to rest properly, never been given a proper committal. And we out here playing politics because we don't want to be seen as culpable, or we don't want to offend a property owner. Meanwhile, the property owners that were killed in Greenwood, nobody seems to care about.
I agree with Dr. Turner, and I would just add that on so many issues and levels, Tulsa is good about maintaining status quo, right? The game is consistent, where we're talking about reparations, where we're talking about economic development, whatever the case may be. We're good at maintaining the status quo and looking like we're doing something without actually moving the needle, right? And I think that's what, just to speak to what the Dr. Turner is talking about. And it is taking too long. And the commission is getting frustrated with the hand holding that's taking place when it comes to the old Booker T. Washington Cemetery and the owner. We were told from day one that this is going to be approached like a criminal investigation, a crime scene investigation. And slowly but surely, that belief is dissipating because we have our meetings, we have our commissioners come and talk about these things and discuss the progress or lack thereof. And it's getting to a very frustrating point where we're saying, are we just doing this to make it seem like we're trying to address these issues, these concerns? We're trying to come to terms with what has happened, the massacre, or are we going to really do something about it? And so there are commissioners that absolutely, I'm certainly getting frustrated as a city leader or elected official, but others in the community, we are slowly but surely losing our credibility. And I say we, I'm not talking about the commissioners, but the process, this whole exercise, if you will, for these reasons. And so, I think for a lot of people, or some people in this city, we're just trying to get past May 31st and June 1st. There are those that say, okay, let's get to June 2nd of 2021 so we can put this stuff behind us, right? And I think as we continue to approach the centennial, we're seeing that more and more, or at least that's coming more and more obvious, that we're just trying to get past, and then we can get back to business as usual. And so that's frustrating fact, a frustrating reality. But I can tell you that there are those boots on the ground leaders that are not going to follow that scenario. We're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to be that voice in speaking truth to power and demanding justice for our ancestors 100 years ago, as well as our community today.
Absolutely. We got to keep going. So I definitely commend your efforts, as well as the others that are on the front lines, on the ground, and, making their voices heard. Because one thing about this nation is, all across the nation, when it comes to progress for Black liberation, it's extremely slow. All right. So moving on to our next question. People use Black Wall Street as an example of what it might look like for Black folk to be separatists, and an example of how white America and our government will destroy anything we build for ourselves. Knowing this, what is the possibility of us having another Black Wall Street in America? And Counselor, I would love for you to answer this first, and then go and then have Shanice respond. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's a very strong possibility, and that's most certainly what we are working on. We are battling gentrification, just like so many other communities are throughout this country. One of the ways in which we are fighting against that is that we've created the Power Group Community Development Corporation, and it is just the blueprint of what the forefathers and our founders of Greenwood did, in that they pulled their money, they pulled their resources, they came together as community and created this mecca of Black entrepreneurship. I want to add, and I want to push back on those that say that, the only reason why this was effective, and the only reason why we were able to do this, Black people were able to do this, was because of segregation. And I just want to say, no, that's not true. Black communities coming together, done in Africa before we got off the boat, was something that we as a people did. 1906 was the state when Oklahoma became a state, and so Jim Crow did not come into place. And to my sister Shanice's point, Jim Crow, or the establishment of Jim Crow, was in fact the first law, the first statute made on the books, but that wasn't until 1906. And so these were individuals, generation out of slavery, that built Greenwood. And so it was not simply because, we couldn't. It was, we're coming to build for ourselves, regardless to what the white establishment or any other establishment for that matter, because the land was purchased by Black people from Native Americans. Okay. And so that was not the reason. I just want to make sure we speak that and stop attributing our success as Black people when it comes to Black entrepreneurship and Black success to the fact that white folks didn't let us. We did it because it is within us to do. And so one of the things we're doing most recently today is we have established the Power Group, which is the economic development arm of the Black Wall Street Chamber of Commerce. We want to buy back our land. We want to demand our land, but at the end of the day, money is power, and we want to make sure that we are coming together, pooling our resources to do just that, to buy our land and to develop our land, our community, the way we want it developed, and not waiting for outsiders, people from outside our community, to do that for us. Because in my community, all that ever ended up being was dollar stores. And so that's a whole nother conversation of what we did in order to combat that. But we want to do it ourselves. And we have the wherewithal, we have the education, we have the skill sets to do that. And so the Power Group is a way in which to do that. I would add, if anyone is interested in contributing to that, please go to the Black Wall Street Chamber of Commerce website, and you can contribute to that Power Group fund continuously and that's what we need, not just a one hit it and quit it, but consistently and continuously contributing to that. I also want to note that please do your research when you're talking about giving. Now, Tulsa is on the worldwide stage. That's just the reality because of the massacre. And so there are those in this community that look like us, Black folks who are con artists, who are crooks, who are seeking to profit off of our history. And so please do your research, reach out, make sure that you are dealing with reputable people and reputable organizations. Just because they look like us and say that they are for Black businesses and Black entrepreneurship does not mean that they are. And so do your research to make sure you have reached out. My information is open. City Council email address, City Council website, just Google it and make sure that you are investing in something that's going to be beneficial for the community and not beneficial for individuals. Hate to have to say that, but that's just the reality of the times we live in. So we'll get to a point too where you can give your information, counselor, so that people can follow you and donate. I want to go ahead and move on because we do have about 10 minutes left. And what I wanted to talk about is the fact that the race riot was recently added to Oklahoma's curriculum. And I kind of want to talk about that and why you think that it was, such a violent, despicable act was omitted from local, state, and national histories in the first place. And now, I think in 2020, sometime last year, it was added to their curriculum. Vanessa, if you want to answer that. Yeah, I think shame is one reason, but more than that, it's accountability. No one wanted to be accountable to what took place here. No one wants, when I say no one, the power structure of any city, of any state, but the power structure of this state, in this city, wants to forget that. They don't want to acknowledge that Tulsa is a racist ass city and that Oklahoma is a racist ass state. In my opinion, Oklahoma is the most racist state in this country. That's my personal opinion. I've also lived in Mississippi. I went to school at Jackson State, HBCU, got to give the shout out. But and just in my perception, we have 77 counties. All 77 counties are red counties consistently in our presidential election. Last two elections, Oklahoma has been the very first state to report its electoral college votes for the Republican Party. And so I think to your point, to your question, shame, but accountability or the lack thereof. No one wants to be held accountable. No one wants to pay. No one wants to make reparations. They are doing their damnedest to say, no, we can't do this. Black lives don't matter. They didn't matter 100 years ago, and it still doesn't matter today. Tulsa being the only major city in this country that removed its Black Lives Matter mural from city property. And so we can continuously show the world who we are as a city. And I know a lot of people don't like me for saying it because I'm supposed to be, shedding light or at least showing Tulsa to be, because I'm a city official. And I'll say it here, like I said, I represent the community on the council. I don't represent the council. I represent my constituents on the council, and there's a difference. And so at the end of the day, no one wants to be held accountable, and that's the world we live in. Black lives don't matter. They never have, and they never will. We have to continue to fight for every inch that we can get. Power concedes nothing without a demand, and we're going to continue to make sure that demand is very clear for our community.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, we're going to go around the table and for 1 minute, 1 minute responses, that is. So it seems like Black and brown folk are damned if they do and damned if they don't. Should we even expect the U.S. Constitution to protect us when the very foundation of this country has been, is still rooted in white supremacy? And I'll let the Reverend take that, and then we can go to Shanice and then Counselor.
I think the Black people have always believed more in America than America has believed in Black folks. Black people have had a love affair with the dream of America, and never has left the nightmare. It's sad when you're in a relationship and you love the other person more than they love you. And I'm just gonna leave that where it is, because that's what Black people are and have always been in this country.
That was deep. Shanice, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I feel like it's going to start with us taking accountability to, as we said, as we know that we can rebuild another Black Wall Street. This is not impossible, but just as like we build another Black Wall Street, we do have to also have our own enforcement, our own law enforcements. We have to get our own people, even if that's our children, teach them how to survive, teach them how to protect each other, teach them how to be tactical. Because when I'm prior military, so I'm an Army vet, and when I look at the type of people that come into the military, especially if they're coming from white families, a lot of times they're very advanced, and the type of things they did, and they're young. Sometimes they're only 18, they're 19, but they know how to use guns, they know how to do certain tactical trainings already, and they come to the Army to kind of just live out that fantasy of being this kind of warrior, and it reminds me of that. What exactly are we teaching our kids? Like, we don't want to teach them to be child soldiers, but what type of mentality are we teaching our kids about how to protect their own? How not to rely on a police force that we have known has been very racist, that started out as the slave catchers. How are we going to continue doing that? And I find that with us, we're kind of still putting our faith into the white governments and what they feel like their forefathers created for them. It's for them, and even though today it feels like things are turning around a little bit, you are having the Hispanic population is now increasing. They're now 17%. We're still, they say 13%. It's becoming very multicultural here. So it's the possibilities are starting to change. The dynamic in America is starting to change, but the mindset, I still believe that we have to kind of change, because we understand who our threat is. But how long are we going to continue to ask for a hug from our threat? How long are we going to continue to tell them that all we want is an apology? And though it feels good to get that apology, but they'll apologize, and as soon as you turn around, stab me in the back. This has happened multiple times, and it repeatedly happens to the point where it's like, okay, if we can build a Wall Street, once again, if we can build group economics, and I just want to highlight something. What was so powerful about the Tulsa Wall Street was that the dollar circulated 36 to 100 times. There has never been a community ever in American history that had ever can implement or even mimic what Tulsa had down pat. You even had families owning their own helicopters out there. They had their own plumbing systems that white families didn't even have yet. So all of this is possible. I just think we just have to change our mindset and look at where we're trying to go for our children to come.
Absolutely. Thank you. Counselor, would you like to tackle that? We just have a few minutes left, so just please keep it brief.
Absolutely. Yes, I do think we still need to use the Constitution. We have to use this country's documents, its practices, its policies, to turn it against them, right? What they expect in their communities, they use this document. So that's all we really have. That's all we really have. I agree with what Sister Shani said and what everyone has said. But at the end of the day, we have to use these documents and these laws against them, because that's all we have. We have to create an economy within an economy. And that's what we're talking about. When you go to New York and these other big cities, you see a Chinatown, right? You see little Italy and all of these communities. But when we start talking about Black communities, then all hell breaks loose, right? And we become we become racist. I'm so sick of folks. I've been called a racist so many times. I mean, it's just funny to me. Black people can't be racist, by the way, but that's another segment. But at any rate, yes, we have to use this glorious document that they call glorious against them. This is what we have to use, as we are Africans in this country, Africans in America. We have to use it. So yeah, let's use it, and that's why we need more attorneys that's well versed in it, so that we can turn it on themselves.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, so we are approaching an hour, and we have to bring this Facebook Live portion of this discussion to a close. I'd like to hear your takeaways, and again, please be super brief, 30 seconds, from tonight's panels. What jewels would you like to drop on the people tonight? And you can go ahead at this point and just drop your website, social media handles, or whatever you want to share with the people to follow you and your work.
Rev Dr. Robert Turner is my Instagram handle. Rev Dr. Robert Turner 1 is my Twitter handle. VernedMe.com is the church website. RobertTurnerMinistries.net is my personal website. We've already had 2 jewels drop today. That's Shanice and our great illustrious council person, Vanessa Hall-Harper, who is one of the shining stars in the state of Oklahoma that I'm privileged to have as my personal council lady and now president of the council. So those are the 2 jewels I have. Thank you all. Thank you, Brandon, for having me. And thank you, Sister Trina, for being a wonderful facilitator.
Thank you. Shanice?
Yes. Hi. Yes. So once again, my name is Shanice. You call me Shanjor. You can find me on Twitter at the real Shan J, and that's SHANJ. You can also find me on Instagram at XO Shanjor, and let me spell that for you. That's XOSHANJOR. I am on Clubhouse too under the real Shanjor as well. And my jewels I want to drop is that, once again, I'm gonna basically take what he said, that you guys all are Jews for this, but I also just want to say that never stop the fight. And sometimes I hear a lot of my out people, really, that sometimes it doesn't look promising, and the work gets hard, and it doesn't look like it has our end, and it doesn't look like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But I'm here to tell you that it's been prophesized that there's going to be a turn in the tides, and I don't want none of my people, I don't want anyone feeling like they cannot achieve or they cannot rebuke this system, because one day this system has to fall. All systems do. But when it's that time is coming, we have to be ready, and we have to be prepared to put ourselves in the proper positions.
Thank you, Shanice.
Yes, you can contact me on Facebook. Just vote for Vanessa or Vanessa Hall-Harper. You can also reach us on through our city council. Just Google Tulsa City Council, and my contact information will be found there as a District 1 city councilor. My jewel is power to the people. Power to the people. Be unapologetic about loving yourself, and don't let anyone make you feel ashamed of loving yourself. That is a trick that this country has put on us since day one. Black is negative. No, it's not. Black is beautiful. Love yourself, and economics is the key. We can buy education. We can buy any and everything we want. Get our economics together, and then we can achieve what we need in our communities and do it ourselves and for ourselves. God bless.
Right on, right on. We want to
power to the people.
Power to the people.
We would like to thank each of our panelists for participating tonight. I hope to have you guys come back on the show again on future episodes of the series. Please follow their pages, go to their websites. I know I will. And I also want to thank those of you who tuned in here on Facebook as well as Clubhouse. The conversation will continue on Clubhouse with questions and comments from the audience. Counselor and the Reverend will not be on Clubhouse, but I, Shanice, Trina, and I believe Vanessa Charlotte, who's supposed to be attending, who's a lecturer and at the International Center of Photography, will be there. And if you haven't already, follow us on IG and Facebook at Betrayal of a Nation, and on Twitter at Betrayed Nation. Until next week, good night, Facebook. Bye, everybody.
Bye.